Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors consisting of some of the best tech leaders in the world, people you may have never heard of, but who in just an hour, you'll know their unfiltered career story, the bets they took, the decisions they made, where they failed, and the lessons that they learned along the way. Welcome to the What Makes You Tick podcast. Hello, my name is Tolu, aka The Podfather, and I have the pleasure of hosting What Makes You Tick.
It is a pleasure to have you as our host, Tolu, because I am Richard Washington, owner of Talend, and without you, this podcast would be nothing. Equally, without our incredible guests. And this week, we've got an absolute legend within the world of SDR. Tolu, Podfather, who do we have on this week?
We have Catherine Olivier on the podcast. And Richard, I noticed last week that you have a shiny new title as ambassador to SDR leaders for EMEA. So congratulations. And Catherine is a fellow ambassador, isn't she?
She is indeed. Thank you very much. It's from our friend of the pod, the legend that is David Wilkins, who has created this incredible community. It's over 1,200 members now.
Amazing. Who
are SDR leaders within EMEA. And he's built this thing from an idea that he had on his dog walk with Chucky about how SDR leaders in EMEA are very much trying to do this incredibly difficult, complex thing without necessarily the same support that our US friends have. And so he's created this incredible environment of learning and growth and opportunity with this wonderful vision for the future. And David was announcing this opportunity for people to become ambassadors of the program and basically hype men, like we are, Tolu, hype men.
Absolutely.
And women for the ambassadors. And so I was like, I'd love that opportunity. And obviously Catherine had to be involved in that because she's just, incredibly successful and is in an incredible role within Snowflake, which is one of the best companies in SaaS. They basically wrote the book on how to go and do this sort of stuff effectively. So what did you enjoy about this conversation?
Catherine comes as like a global citizen. So she mentions that she's from the Netherlands, which is like in between lots of different countries. So I spent lots of time bridging that gap between the different cultures. And she brings that into her leadership. And her approach, she's an epic leader. So she's the person that will make the connections with the other teams, take some of the responsibility where maybe it doesn't need to be hers. As she puts it, I put my nose where it doesn't necessarily belong, but in a really nice, kind way that doesn't annoy people. So she's got a really, really good skill set, an amazing story and journey, and yeah, just a great human.
Absolutely. I think it's even more evidence as to why we need great diversity in our leadership team, because you get that kind of level of cultural impact and power and intelligence with a bunch of empathy that you don't just get if you just got a bunch of guys who are running your sales organization. So yeah, I can't wait to hear this conversation. Without further ado, let's roll the VT.
Catherine, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, very glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear more about your story and your journey. But first, what makes you tick?
What makes me tick? I think it's mostly developing people, specifically young people in their career, which obviously the SDR leadership role is super great for. It's also a big part of why I'm so pleased to be an ambassador with the EMEA SDR leaders community now. It's on LinkedIn. We've got a group on Slack. It's very much there for all the leaders, SDR leaders in EMEA, to be connected, because we weren't. We were very much on our own, where in America they had like forums and days and events, etc. It was felt that we needed to do the same in Europe. So now we have this community, more than 1,000 members already. Wow. Where it's experienced people, but also the people that are literally in their first management role. So we can help them and give them advice. There's lots of chats going on with people like about the best tools or the best tips and tricks, etc. And also sharing of talent. And do you have a good candidate for Germany or anything along those lines? So it's very, very good. And being involved and having regular mentoring sessions with various leaders that are like young and at the beginning and who are just looking for some advice. I really enjoy that.
And what's your role as ambassador? What does that involve?
It's mainly, I think, being a sounding board for our dear founder, David Wilkins. He started it, and he just needed a group around him to kind of getting the bigger picture of like what topics should we cover, how often are we covering this, are there other people we need to get on board, etc., etc. So very much like the face and the people in the background, making it all happen.
Yeah, and David Wilkins is an ex-podcast alumni from What Makes You Tick, so it's great to see that actually all of our podcast people are connecting. That makes us very happy.
It's very fun. No, absolutely.
So you mentioned that you're doing some mentorship within the program. Where have you gone in the past to get mentorship? Because as you get more senior, sometimes it's a bit harder to find people to mentor you. So where have you gone to get mentorship in the past?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think when I was at the beginning of my managerial career, I didn't have the mentors I needed, which is why I so much realized the need, right? Like if only I'd had that then, is definitely a thought behind it. I've been very lucky to have very strong managers myself. So like the bosses I had at the time were the people that I looked up at or looked up to, and very much aspired to become like them, right? And God, you go a decade on and you start to think of like, oh, kind of getting there. It's nice. So there's been that. And we're still in touch, right? So still like, can I just ask you something? Can we just like just to double click on something? So that happens. And then I've had a few organizations that I worked for that had like buddy programs and mentorship programs just built internally, which is nice as long as you're within the company, obviously. But those things tend to end a bit when you move on. So yeah, it's been on and off, so to say. But lucky to have just those few people around that are always willing to give their view, so to say.
Yeah, and so if you think back, I would love to hear, and you can feel free to name some of your good managers. We don't name bad managers, but who are some of the people that you think back, like that person really impacted me, and what were the top lessons that you learned from each of those people?
Okay. Without naming names, I had two very strong female bosses quite early at the beginning of my career, which I found very inspiring because when I was an SDR and when I was in sales, I only saw the guys. And then to move into a role and have like a lady lead like a global organization of XYZ, I was like, that is very inspiring. So it can be done, right?
Yeah.
And then also very much without, and I don't know how this makes it sound, but without trying to be one of the guys, but very much just like, no, I'm a
Being
woman
themselves.
and I do things my way.
Yeah.
So, and both of them did that. And I think what that taught me is that you can like move up the ladder without losing sight of who you are and without having to pretend to be someone you're not or something you're not. And just kind of make your leadership style your own. And if you like being silly, then you should be silly. And if you like, it doesn't matter if that's you that you should do that. And don't think, oh, well, but those guys never do that, so I should probably not do that either. Right? So I think those were the things that, like, by seeing them do it, being part of their team and just like living it, I think that was the biggest thing I took away from those two ladies at the time. Just seeing how that can be done. And then another leader I ended up working for a little bit later in my career, a guy, right? Fine, but very much inspiring in the sense that very involved on a personal level with the team. So and that kind of also taught me, like, no matter how high up in the chain you end up going, no matter how big your team becomes, it never makes you too important to know that someone's going through something or someone just had a baby or some, like to really get down to at the personal level with people. And again, that is something that I really wanted to like make sure I made my own as well, to not become a person that only looks at numbers and at sheets and not knows what's going on with the team really.
Hmm. And is that something that's quite hard to do in sales where it's very numbers driven?
Yeah, I think so. Specifically when you get to like the leadership positions where
Mm,
you get a spreadsheet and they say, look, these numbers are bad. So what are we, get rid of this person or like do
mm,
something about it. And
mm,
I think it's a very valuable and powerful to be able to say, "Well, but do you realize that X,
mm.
and we should probably like help them these ways,
Yeah.
because it's better to actually like help them and then get them back on track than just to go, well, exit and start over."
Mm,
Because I'm very much for trying to get people, to develop and to learn and to grow. And yeah, sometimes there's bumps in the roads and you need to be there for them to get past that rather than just go, oh, well, that's just 1 or 2 quarters of really bad numbers. That's the end of it. Bye.
mm, mm, mm. And what are some success stories that you've had with that kind of approach?
Um, well, apart from having a lot of team members over the years that I'm still very much like in touch with,
Mm,
and so on. So you actually build relationship that lasts beyond just being colleagues. And when you move on and you're like 5 companies ahead, we're still talking. I think that's valuable because you build your network, right? And you have those people around you. So that's very good. And just see people develop and grow into directions that you might not necessarily have expected, right?
mm,
Because it's
mm.
always with SDRs that you go, oh, well, SDR will probably become inside sales rep, field sales rep, etc. But then seeing them effectively and helping them to like realize that maybe that's not what they want, but they have other strengths and they want to go into marketing or engineering or enablement, etc. It's just really really nice.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I think seeing that growth and still being part of that person's journey is such an honor to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you had to describe your career in 3 words, what 3 words would you
Fracture, because I had like 2.
pick?
um, Fast, I would
Okay,
say. And I would like, well, successful. I'm quite pleased with how things are going. So I'm happy to elaborate, so
please
to
do.
say.
Please do.
Um, so I studied law,
Okay.
and got 2 bachelors and a master in law, and then started working as a lawyer, as you do, right, in the
Yeah.
Netherlands. Did that for 4 or 5 years or something like that, whilst also working while I was studying. So I had quite a lot of years under my belt by that time.
Mm,
And then after all of that, realized it's not for me, and
mm.
that I was actually not enjoying it as much as I thought I would,
Okay.
and that it wasn't the type of lifestyle that I had the ambition to keep doing. So
Mm,
needed to regroup, and like for personal reasons, moving from the Netherlands to the UK was like the chance of like, okay, so what am I going to
yeah.
do now? But I didn't really know because I always wanted to do law and that was always the one path. So it wasn't like, well, if then I'll just do XYZ. I had no clue. So very randomly just posted my resume online and a recruiter called me saying, oh yeah, no, we need an SDR who speaks Dutch and maybe a bit of French
Wow.
and German on the side of it if you can. And we'll teach you everything like from the start, because I had no clue, right? So,
Mm,
and I was like, well, I have no idea if this is for me. It sounded really random. I've no idea what this job means. And then did it and fell in love with it. Just really,
wow.
really enjoyed it. And that's kind of how that started. So started as an SDR. It was a relatively small company at the time, and that meant I got to see a lot of the different functions. So
Mm,
inside sales, channel sales, field sales, marketing, enablement, and all of that. And having been one of the first people on board, you become that more senior person, helping to onboard others and train them, etc. I was like, well, this is what I enjoy. This is right. So again, just rolling into it, not planned, not effort, not anything. And then
Mm,
when there wasn't an option to actually do that officially within that first company, it's like, well, let's see if anyone else wants me, right? So kind of that moved on like that, and that's how I started just in my like inside sales and SDR manager roles. and kind of have been doing that ever since, which has been great. But if you realize that that was about a decade ago,
Mm.
like that move happened, and then seeing how fast, I find it quite fast. I've like moved through to like get different types of teams, bigger teams at bigger companies, and so on. It's been quite rewarding, I must say.
Mm. So you mentioned that you fell in love with it. What were some of the things within sales that you fell in love with?
Various facets of it. I think one was just to have dealing with people, right?
Mm.
Coming from law, having to only read like books and write things, etc. Not like having a lot of human interaction on a daily basis. At least in my function at the time, just talking to people, picking up the phone and like speaking, or going to events, or meeting with partners and setting out plans, etc. I really enjoyed that bit of it. I think it's the psychology behind it, of like, how can I make these people care about what I'm trying to, sell them? And learning that there's like tricks, I'll call them tricks, so like techniques
Yeah.
around what works and what doesn't, and what works in a certain country doesn't work in another, and what works with certain personas doesn't work with some others, and really trying to get to the bottom of that. I enjoyed it, and then realizing that after you think you finally figured all of that out, 6 months later everything changed, and you need to start all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so effectively, it just never gets boring because it's always changing, it's always moving. You can get quite good at what you do, but you have to keep it up, like the practice, so to say.
Mm. And just to touch on that a little bit more, was it something that you started and you were just good at, or was there quite a bit of a learning curve and adjustment period when you moved from law into sales?
I think, to be fair, a little bit of both. I think you do need to have a certain, I don't know, attitude and personality in order to be able to be good at it or become good at it. So I don't necessarily think anyone can just go and do it well very quickly. I think I went in there so open-minded and like unassuming that I just went on and did it, and kind of was like, okay, well, this turns out all right. But definitely like training courses, lots of enablement, lots of reading on like what works and what doesn't. So yeah, I've definitely put the effort in, so to say, to try and become better. So it didn't all come just natural, so to say. But yeah, I think some innate ability of just talking needs to be there.
Okay. And one of the words that you picked was successful. What have been some of your big successes or some of your favorite moments of your career so far?
Well, I would say big successes have been like I mentioned before, like having like successful people on my team being promoted and moving through the ranks, and now seeing them as like heads of sales and heads of SDRs and stuff like that. You go, oh, okay, that's pretty cool that we got to stand at the beginning of that one. So that's I think a good one. And in general, just knowing that pretty much wherever we had teams and wherever we were working, we were doing well, improving on numbers, improving on processes, and all of that. So I joined a few companies at a like an early-ish stage when it came to like their SDR teams. So they would have like 4 people or no people, or like just a bit, and then coming on board, like building the setup and the team itself and all the processes around it, and then seeing now, looking back, that like years later, it's a solid group and it's still growing and so on, is pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And as you started to lead people, what were some of the tougher lessons that you had to learn as a leader?
People are unpredictable. Yeah, I think that's the one. I think I always go in with like, always assume good intent and good intentions, right? Always lead from like a positive tone, but you can't predict it. You can't trust necessarily always that people are going to behave the way that you expect them to do when you give them something. So there's that. Another thing is just like, as a leader, you're tied by higher up leadership budget constraints, headcount constraints, strategy changes, etc. So I think the realization that no matter how much I would want something to happen for my team, and I would know it's the better thing to do and the right thing to like put in place, you might not be able to, or not yet, or right, there might be reasons that it's just not possible at that given point in time. So managing expectations of the team and expectations of like the leadership side is I think one of the trickier things to do, because for instance an SDR will come and say, hey, I've been here, I don't know, a year and a half, I want to be promoted. It's like, well, great, I would love to promote you, you've done great, I think it's amazing, absolutely, you know, fully support that, but there's no headcount, or there's no budget to get headcount, it is just not there, right? What do you do, right? Then it's like managing people's lives in a way, like you go like, do I help you go somewhere else? Are you willing to be very patient and wait around to see if I can still figure it out for you? Can we like keep you here but train you further so you're even more ready a little bit further along the line? So in that example, it's just like it's balancing what is possible and what the options are, and sometimes you just don't get what you want, right? You just don't get the budget, or you don't, the timing doesn't work, and so on, and that can be frustrating because you put a lot of, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into something, and then you just don't get the outcome that you were hoping for. But yeah, it is what it is sometimes.
I'm intrigued as to how you manage that tension, because I think that that's a part of going through the ranks that people don't really think about, is that sometimes you're senior enough to know that, okay, this is coming, like this might not be good for my team, I might not be able to do the things that I want to do, but you're no longer in the space where you can share that with your team, but you're also not senior enough to really impact that decision. Like it's a real crappy tension place. So I'm intrigued as to how you've navigated that effectively and what's been helpful for you.
Well, I've navigated in a way that is maybe innately like me, which is I always stick my nose where it doesn't belong. So I tend to get involved anyway.
Okay.
So, you know, if there's, I've genuinely had a situation where I needed something and everyone was telling me no, and I went all the way up to the CEO. It's like, I want to just talk to him. I just want to understand why it can't be done.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that created more understanding on his end. It's like, oh, actually, like with all the layers in between, it kind of never filtered up that way.
Yeah.
But also going back to my team saying, look, I went all the way up.
Tried. Yeah.
I really tried.
I really tried.
So look, still didn't get what I wanted, but it came later, right? It was then put on the roadmap, so to say, and sorted, just too late for what I needed at that time. But it's just one of those things that, like, I try to become part of the story. I try to become part of like the whatever team it is. They say, like, do you want me to present to what it is, why I feel is important? Do you want me to make more slide decks to explain why it is important? And then kind of see what the hang-ups are, what the blockers are, and how we can maybe then take those away to make it happen. And look, also just be open and able to listen to other people, because what I feel is super important to me and my team, there's finance, there's legal, there's HR, there's like loads of reasons that they might have that what I want is probably good, but there's like lots of reasons that they shouldn't be doing it. So also just being very mindful that I don't know everything, right? Like I need to be like receptive to all those other inputs, and then learning to balance that, no matter if I like it or not, to be fair.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful description, because I think that the more senior you get, a lot of your job is unblocking, because you don't tend to do as much of the selling or whatever it was that got you there, but now you have a very different skill set. And I think what you said about being able to understand and unblock things is so valuable.
Yeah, and that's what I now very much also enjoy about my role. It's like having enough of a understanding still of what's going on, like in the trenches, right?
Yeah.
and then also talking to them, like what's going on and what are you doing and what tools are you using and what's working and what's not, and then kind of seeing the trends and the bigger picture of like, hey, we need this and we need to change that, and then trying to solve it for them. Yeah.
What are some of the skills that you brought from your law career that have been really effective for you in sales?
I think being able to word things properly is a good one, right? Learning how to write, whether it was my sales emails in the beginning, right? To have some proper written sales email. But now also being able to articulate if I need something done, why, what the counter arguments are, the normal arguments, and then kind of like logic my way to a good outcome. And yeah, so just and always questioning things. Like they always say, like the way I was trained to like always see like all the hazards and risks and potential problems on the road, and then try to kind of think ahead and solve them before they occur. So I've been called like a doomstinker or something like that. Or like, oh, you always see all the problems. It's like, yeah, but on the other hand, like things hardly ever go wrong.
Yes.
Because we've the basis.
Yeah. And I think that kind of thinking is really good if you solve the problem. So I think some people just call out the problems and don't do anything to solve them. But it sounds like you're quite proactive about, okay, this is the problem. This is what we're going to do to solve it. And then we can move forward.
Yeah. Although I wouldn't necessarily like be the person to always solve it. I'm very much like working with the team. I've got a team of great managers. I usually have a great team of managers around me. And it's like, what do you want? Because I don't want to be that person to go, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't care. This is the way, right? So, so very much getting their input and coming to something that works for all of them. Because very much again, like I've led global teams and I've got a European team. They need different things. They have different issues. So it's one thing for me to go, oh, I think this will fix it, and then people in Asia to go, oh, this doesn't work for us. And we really need to make sure that that we don't miss things, and that's why I always open it up to the group.
So just on that point of leading global or kind of regional teams, how did you learn how to do that? Because that's quite a specific skill set to be able to manage cross cultures and different things like that. So what was your journey to that, and how did you learn that?
Oh, good question. It went very organically. Is that the right word to say? Obviously, I'm Dutch. The Dutch always have to deal with all kind of people around Europe because, I mean, who knows the Netherlands, right? So the ability to deal with like the Belgians and the Germans and the French, that comes relatively natural to us because that's kind of how we grew up.
Yeah.
And then you just learn working in big corporate environments, the Americans, oh my goodness, those Americans.
Different.
And then you start working and you have to learn about the things that are going on in India and how people deal with things in Japan and how different all of that is. I was lucky enough that I started with a European team and I was asked to add like the APJ region to my remit. And then I just asked a lot of questions like, how does that work? What bank holiday is this now? What are you guys doing? Like kind of working my way through that. And then after that became successful, I was asked by the CEO, like, can you also take the American team on? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I've now been here for a while. I've seen kind of how it goes. And then you do it. And look, sometimes you still like foot in mouth and you go, oh my goodness, sorry, this is completely different. But I think it's about being open, being like willing to learn and just telling them, look, I don't know everything, right? I might not know this is a culturally quite heavy situation, but tell me, right? Just bring it up. And also just like reading up on it again, like trying to learn, trying to like avoid all the main pitfalls, so to say. But I think as long as, in my view, or how I've always like approached it, I don't come across as my way or the highway, I know it all, etc. And just being vulnerable and saying, look, this is new. I don't know. Tell me. And then just taking it from there.
Are there any of those foot and mouth situations that you can share?
No. Genuinely, because I now can't think of one.
Okay.
but no, genuine, no.
No problem. No problem. So is there a preference that you have in terms of regional teams versus global teams?
No, not particularly. I mean, it's just more different cultures, etc. I mean, I can say that now only leading the EMEA team makes sure that I have only 2 time zones to cover instead of like 6.
Yes.
So my working days are a bit nicer.
Okay. Okay.
Not having to start with people in Australia and end with people in California, but just have the people in Europe, that
Yeah.
it makes quite a difference.
Yes.
So when it comes to like managing my day and my work time, etc., yeah, it's different. But I've always felt that like being based in Europe to lead a global organization is really, really beneficial. I know most of the times SDR orgs globally are led from America, right? Very often even like from West Coast. But I found like I'm in the middle, right? I can go a little bit earlier, and I've
Yeah.
got APJ, and a little bit later, and I've got America, and it's just really, really practical. So I don't understand why not more global leadership functions are based out of Europe, because we've got the best of it, right?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I would definitely not mind having a global leadership role at some point very far in the future again. But I'm very, very happy now.
Okay, great. Great. So you recently started a new role at Snowflake and you're leading SDRs. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in SDR world?
Goody me. Loads of trends, definitely. But I think one of the main ones is very much about the value of SDRs to the wider organization. Because I think historically it's very much about let SDRs book meetings. The more meetings, the better. They hit all their numbers when they book their meetings. But it's now about like, but what's the value to the wider organization? What's our impact on actual revenue, right? Are we paying for ourselves? So that's, I think, a trend that is becoming more prevalent, because like SDR orgs become irrelevant very quickly if all they do is booking meetings and not they can't prove the value that they bring to the sales team, for instance. So that's something that I've always been very passionate about. I would almost say, like in all the organizations that I've been at, so like what is our impact? Like apart from like me hitting my numbers when I book meetings, that's great, but what's the pipeline, and is that pipeline closing, and is it actually worthwhile, or do we need to like change and course correct a little bit?
How have you been able to
So that's
put
trend
together?
one. Yeah,
Sorry,
and I
say
think
that
another
again.
one is
Sorry, say that again. I missed that.
So I think that was one trend, and
Okay.
the other one is very much about the change that we're seeing and have been seeing for quite a while between like the not so very personalized spray and pray approach to proper personalized targeted messaging, and SDRs being a lot more on value than volume, so to say, and like having lower activity metrics potentially, but a very much higher return on the efforts that they're putting in. But it's finding that balance that's so hard.
I would love to hear a little bit more about some of the things that you found that work, because the personalization thing is quite a big challenge at the moment. So what have you found useful, and where people have been successful in finding that balance of volume, value, personalization? What's been good for that?
I think what's been good is really looking at your numbers. It sounds very boring, but the data is key in that sense. So being able to articulate your conversion rates, like say, oh, of every so many people I add, this many people get back, this many people I call, this many people I speak to, this is how many meetings and opportunities you end with, and just do the math. So how many do I need? And then where can I tweak to get this response rate up, or this acceptance rate up, etc. And then work your way back based on like, okay, if I need this many people, how many accounts? And then, build your way through that, because just to go to any SDR and say, well, here's 300 accounts, good luck. no idea where to start, right? So great relationship with the AE to really sit down and go, okay, we're going to go after these few now with
Mm.
this type of messaging to this type of persona, but I need at least 20 or 40 of them in order to
Yes.
then hit my numbers and have a chance of success. So I think it's a combination of just being very, very numbers driven, knowing that you have to have a certain level of activity to have a certain result, but also then a great collaborative relationship with not only your AEs in sales, but also with marketing, and sometimes even sales engineering and so on. Right? You need to have the right people ready to jump in where you need them.
Mm. And are there any particular tweaks or any particular things that you found that are pretty consistently successful? So, for example, a certain way of approaching people. Is there anything that you found that's pretty consistently works across all the different companies that you've worked in?
Well, funnily enough, and this is going to sound so funny, we need to call more.
Yeah.
SDRs don't pick up the phone enough.
Yeah.
It is silly. Because based on any evidence, booking meetings, finding opportunities from actually talking to people is 9 times out of 10 the way to go, right? And it's quite successful. But then when you look at like the activity that comes out of the average SDR, what, 3-4 times more emails than calls? You go
Mm.
like you put all your efforts in your emails, but you know your calls are the ones that make you successful. Why are you not calling? Right? And
Yeah.
that sounds it sounds like such a basic question, but the fact that it's still not just done,
Yeah.
sometimes like mind-boggling sometimes. But it's like it's hard. It's getting harder with like all the GDPR rules in Europe, right? Like to get the
Mm.
right data, to find the right
Mm.
phone numbers, etc., etc. So I understand that in at times it might be super hard to actually get hold of someone, right?
Yeah.
But
Mm.
SDR shouldn't give up too soon, right?
Yeah.
I hear of like in general, like people that have like a 2 email 3 call cadence and then they're done. I was like, what? You need to
Wow.
have like what, 17 steps or something at least in order to get somewhere. Don't try it for 5 days and give
Yes.
up, right?
Yes.
So look, time and place for everything. There's different situations that could work, but in general, I think it's a lot more about teaching your prospects and like a consultative approach, right?
Yeah.
Like becoming that trusted voice, and then eventually something will come out of it, rather than just smack bam, thank you, here we go,
Yeah.
and it's done and dusted. So I think in the current world, people are just too impatient, too
Mm.
keen to just go
Mm.
through the motions of just having it done and then move on to the
Yes.
next one. And I think we need to slow it down a little bit.
This is a bit of a personal soapbox of mine that I think mass communication is great. And for me, like the spray and pray email is a bit of mass communication, but the micro communication and the picking up the phone, old school, having the conversation with people, I don't think you can quite beat that. So personal soapbox, I 100% agree. Like we need to pick up the phone more.
Oh, exactly. Or go new school, right? Go do videos or voice notes or
Voice notes,
anything
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Make it a little bit more personal.
But you can't mass personalize a video just yet. I think maybe some AI you can, but it's not like you can't do that for every voice note. It can't say, hey, Catherine, hey, Tolu. You have to actually do it, you know?
Exactly. And look, it's effort yet again, right? So it's like it's finding that balance of having to put the work in and
Yeah,
still being able to reach out to enough people to
enough.
get to
Yeah,
those metrics at the end.
agreed. Because I guess the thing is that you really want to get to a number of meetings booked, and would you rather get there with 40 people reached out to you or 100? So you want to optimize for efficiency as well, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
I wanted to go back to something that you said about measuring the impact. And I think that sometimes what people struggle with is some of the impact that happens outside of their team. So it happens downstream. So I've booked the meetings as an SDR. It gets passed on to someone else. That's not within my control. I don't have visibility of those numbers. How have you been able to bring that all together?
Um, it's very much again about like being the spider in the web in between all the different functions in the organization, right? And sticking my nose where it doesn't belong yet again, in the sense of like working with the sales team and working with sales operations and just going like, so what's going on? Why are they not putting this in pipe? Or why is this being closed out? Or like, because based on their feedback, we can change track, we can change qualification questions, we can change different personas and all of that kind of stuff, right? If that's a trend of a reason that things don't progress or don't have impact. So it's important that we know, but it's also very important to hold sales accountable to not doing their job right either, right? For dropping the ball, not doing a proper follow-up. Like I've been on a crusade a few companies ago where every time we had like a discovery call and we would get great feedback, good discovery call, and then an AE would wait 3 weeks to just send a thank you to the prospect for the call.
Right.
And you go, well, that's a bit of a problem. And then you wonder why that opportunity isn't going anywhere. You can't put that on my team,
Yeah.
right?
We've done our job.
So it's very much, I think, keeping eye of like all the aspects of what makes a deal like move. And not being too short-sighted on, well, I did my job, I gave it to you, and that's the end of the story. But just ask the right questions to the right people and work with them to say, look, I'm willing to help here. What can we do? Like, do you want my team to do the follow-up? What, anything to just make sure that that we might improve that impact that we're having on the pipeline.
How do you put your nose where it doesn't belong without annoying lots of people?
I don't know. You should ask them. No, I think to always come from a genuine place of wanting to be helpful and from genuinely being curious and willing to know and understand more. So not coming in saying like, I know it, listen to me, do what I say, etc. But just go like, where are we here? Like, we have to work on this together. And I'm very willing to like just learn from you guys on why everything is right on your end and how I need to change. But can you just talk me through it and not be too much of a pain about it?
Okay. So just as we close, we do what we call Tickfire questions. So I'll ask you some quick questions, maybe like a minute to answer each one, something like that. Is that cool?
Okay, well, I'll do my best.
I think you'll be okay. What for you is the difference between a good leader and a great leader?
The ability to put yourself, what is it, behind the greater good of the team, and to like, it's an ego thing. I would probably say.
Okay. What is the best advice you've ever been given?
I think that goes back to like almost my SDR days, right? So try to get a win from everything, no matter how small, right? So in SDR world, that means like, look, if you can't get hold of them, but you get a different number or something along those lines, right? Fine, that's good. But like when I translate that to now being in a leadership position, you can't solve big problems in one go, right? So try to stay positive whilst you go through the process, and it takes a long time. A lot of people are involved to go, okay, I spoke to this person, but at least we did this. And now we spoke to that and we've solved this bit of it. And try to see the steps from a positive side rather than being overwhelmed with everything that still needs to be done, and kind of getting depressed by the fast scale of it.
I love that. What are the top 3 things that you look for when you're hiring someone?
Personality, in a way, in a sense that you can't teach someone to be good in talking to people. That is very, very hard. You can improve, but it's very, very hard to teach from scratch. So the ability to just chat, very important. And the ability, like when it also comes to managers, to connect with people, to have empathy, and to like understand what's going on. So I think that's one. Grit, because gosh, being in SDR land, whether that's as an individual contributor or as a manager, is tough, right? And I think that the ability to not give up and just keep going, keep grinding, and not get let down is a good one. And linked to that very much is like a positive mindset, and just to the willingness to like get on with it. I always say, like, when I hire someone, I just want you to get on with it. I don't want to hold your hand the whole time. Just go and do your thing, right? We will steer and coach and course correct and so on, but just go and do it.
Because it's much easier to guide something that's moving than stationary.
Exactly.
Catherine, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I know that a lot of other people will too. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of What Makes You Tick. I hope that you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed having the conversation.
Absolutely. There's so much value in learning from virtual mentors, people that have already gone through incredible careers, and they've got wonderful stories and lessons that they can share for you to have a bigger and better career in tech. And if you like this sort of content, we've also got a newsletter that we publish weekly called Growth Magnet, all about tech startups, leadership, scaling, and performance. We'll put a link in the show notes, and it'll be fantastic to see your comments on our next post.